What's going on, y'all, and welcome on in. Today's video is going to be very different. I will be showing y'all the footage of my interview with Mr. Objection, who made a Reddit post titled, "I'm a Korean player. I would like to shed some light on the E7 issue." Overall, guys, just to break it down real fast in the intro here, Korea views the global players, you could probably take EU and Asia as well into this. They view the global side as more complacent. Some have even said brainwashed. We're just taking it as is. We're too happy and we should be a little bit more upset with the current state of the game. On the other hand, global and the other servers view Korea as maybe entitled, overly whiny, maybe just always asking for more compensation, can never be happy. Guys, this interview is not to prove which side is right or wrong. I don't think either side is right or wrong, but instead to maybe bridge a mutual understanding, because I would definitely had an eye-opening experience after talking with Mr. Objection. And whether you like it or not, boys, Korean players, global players, EU players, Asia players, we all play together. We all play the same game. We have the same patches. So whether you like it or not, their protest movement, their protest culture is going to affect us. So it's better for us to have an understanding. I'm not asking you to condone or accept what they're doing, but it's good to understand how they view things, to empathize with them a little bit, and hopefully for them as well to view what us global players are thinking. So one last disclaimer, I don't speak for any of the global players. I may make some statements in this video. You probably will hear me say I don't pretend to speak for the global player base, and Mr. Objection as well will not be speaking for all Koreans, of course. We just have to say that. You guys are entitled to your own opinions, and I would love for you guys to let me know what you think of the overall state of the game, as well as this interview and the global versus Korea situation. So hopefully you guys enjoy. It's a long interview. I kept most of it in, only edited out a few parts that he asked me to, or if I felt it was out of topic, but enjoy. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. All right, so Mr. Objection, thank you for coming on. I wanted to bring you on because you had a post on Reddit, which I'm showing right now, called "I am a Korean E7 player. I wanted to shed some light on recent issues." And yeah, if you want to give yourself a quick introduction, you kind of stated here in the post, but yeah, go ahead and just let us know your background a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Hi, I'm Mr. Objection. Though I really only go by that name on Reddit. Friends know me as Iggy or Hanglang in Korean circles. But basically, I've been playing E7 for maybe a little under a year, between a few months and a year. I played E7 for the first time actually really early in the game's history, but I kind of just quit. It dropped off. And I was convinced by a friend in the global server to come, play again, saying a lot of things have improved since you last played.
Yeah.
And since then I've played a lot of gacha games. I've played once from Japan, once from China. So I know the kind of what goes on in mobile game communities. And as for E7, even though I play on the global server and I'm a global guild, I spend a lot of time on Korean kind of communities. I don't live on them per se, but a lot of E7 content creators I watch are all from Korea, streamers. I go on Stove or other sites like that every once in a while. And just like I mentioned in the post, I do visit Reddit because there is some good content here. Some people have some great, numbers analyses.
Yeah.
There's some great art, some great content. So
Very good art.
Yeah. and I came in because there was this mounting kind of discontent ever since the release of Angel of Light. I think that's definitely the starting line we can set up here is that release date. And
sure. I agree to that.
And in Korea, at least, that was the start of a kind of dark age where every subsequent release on the in Mystic, in Limiteds, like since then we got Beeline right after that. Aravi got buffed and put on right after that. We got Rimuru, we got and some really powerful covenants like Rand, though I don't really have super problem with powerful regular covenant heroes, but that's a separate topic. And now we have these 7 great disasters, and I think FCC might be the only one that's not recently been updated. She's just that good.
Mr. Objection, can you explain maybe for me and the rest of Global who maybe don't know exactly? I think I have a very good idea. What are the 7 great disasters exactly?
So the 7 great disasters is what people call these 7 particular limited slash moonlight heroes. Well, only where Rimuru would be the only limited covenant, and the rest are all moonlight heroes. And basically, the way the current RTA meta is kind of portrayed, at least in Korea, at least in higher RTA, and to a lesser and lesser extent in the lower tiers. Basically, the more of these 7 great disasters you take in your draft, you're basically, if you have more than the other team, you're basically going to win. Is what the meta looks like right about now. And these would be number 1 Rimuru, number 2 Aravi, number 3 Belian, number 4 FCC, or 5 Mediator Karik, 6 Conqueror Lilius, and 7 Angel Light. So
Got
I
it.
hope that's a good explanation.
Yes.
And essentially what I noticed is like I people were just raging in Korea basically, and a lot of content creators, lots of streamers had announced at this breakpoint of the 16th, where this mounting discontent had actually spurred Smilegate to do an emergency broadcast, and they said, "Look, okay, we hear you guys. Okay, just chill. We're gonna just wait till the 16th, just please." And we're like, "Okay, fine. Looks like they know what's going on. We should be a step in the right direction." It's in the 16th. We got this stream that was mostly about it was a regular update stream, and people were just watching through the whole stream waiting for, okay, when are they going to address the balance situation? And they ended up with, we're going to do a survey. And that was the last thing, that was the only thing they announced regarding balance. And a bunch of streamers at this point had said, if they don't make any concrete announcements about balance changes or anything in this next stream, then I'm going to stop spending. And a lot of whales did stop spending. I think this is a kind of movement that's been less mentioned in global. But in addition to the
sorry to
other...
interrupt real fast, Mr. Jackson. To be clear, when you say streamers, we're talking on the Korean side, and was this
the Korean side?
Was this the February 16th emergency broadcast in Korea?
The February 16th update stream where they talked about Ancient Inheritance and and the new Vivian event or whatever.
Right, because here on Global we have Mashu and Gegeri, and I think sometimes it's a different stream almost.
I see.
But yeah, so just to recap, before February 16th happened, do you know about how long the Korean streamers and player base were kind of like asking Smilegate to address our issues, make an announcement? Do you know how long about that was happening?
I'd say those calls started happening ever since the release of... Some people started even like right at the release of Angel Light.
After so it's been months, possibly.
It's been months.
Okay.
People saw that kit and they were like, that's gonna go out of control. Some people had that kind of gut feeling, and some people demanded that okay, we saw the preview, just please nerf her when she comes live. They didn't, of course, but there was this consistent it's like almost with no breaks, just consistent kind of meta breaking balance changes and buffs, and new releases, and things just kind of snowballed, right?
So
and I think this was the breaking point.
That was the breaking point, and then Smilegate said on the 16th we will address. Did they say that on the 16th?
It was before the 16th. I can't remember the actual date, but they turned on an emergency broadcast. You could tell it was really hastily done. I don't know if so again, I don't watch global streams, so I can't say for sure. But if you saw this, but in the emergency broadcast, Mr. Devi, or I don't know what you call him, Navi.
Yeah, Mr. Navi. That's how we know
Mr. Navi. Sure. All right, Mr. Navi, who's kind of like he used to be a content creator actually. Now he's like the Smilegate spokesperson.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. But basically, he normally he comes on very like prepared. He has a script, and this is why people call these streams home shopping. I don't know if home shopping is a thing in the States, but it's like those infomercials.
Sure,
right?
Sure.
Where they show off products like, look how well this works. Look at this pan, it doesn't stick. That kind of commercial.
Of course, yeah.
So that's what people kind of nicknamed it, because it was so one-sided, and it was clearly off a script or it was pre-recorded. And normally they're very well prepared for streams like that, but this time, Mr. Navi came on. It was just a green screen in the back. There was no background. He looked sort of disheveled, and he was, it was obvious that they were feeling the pressure, which was nice, to know that we were having an impact.
Sure.
And they said, okay, look, I know we know there are issues. We're going to address them for the 16th. Just wait. And 16th was this date of the this
Ancient
the more
Heritage.
official stream.
Yeah.
Right. And as I said, the only thing they announced about balance there was, okay, we're going to do a survey. And people were like, if you're just going to do that and say we're doing a survey, why don't you tell us in that emergency broadcast we're planning a survey? People have been have been these mounting expectations ever since that stream, waiting for the 16th, because they acted like
Got
was
it.
some big announcement.
So that's what a lot of global players were confused on. The way that some of the news came out, it kind of felt like Korea asked Smilegate to make some changes. They made that announcement, and then Korea was still upset. So we weren't sure on the time frame. What you're telling me is this has been happening for months. They said they had an emergency broadcast where they said on the 16th we'll address more of the issues. Correct? Am I on board so far? And then on the 16th, pretty much as we saw in Global, they didn't address anything balance related, just that they said there was going to be a survey. The rest was all about the Guild War news, about all that other stuff. So let me say on the Global side, the reason that Global liked that, because I think this was part of the conflict, right? Korea was very upset, but then you guys were confused why Global's so happy.
Yeah, that was definitely a thing.
Well, I'll tell you right now, we didn't know any of this was happening on the Korean side. We didn't know that you guys were asking for constant changes. Over on Global, we also didn't like AOL. We didn't like any of those constant power creep, answers to another, overbuffing, all that stuff we didn't like as well. But we can get into this later, but the way we kind of asked for feedback, it's a lot different than how I think you guys are able to ask for changes. So the reason we were happy is because if you remember the content patch before the 16th, 2 weeks ago, Global was very unhappy because Mashu and Gegri came on and they pretty much revealed nothing new. Not their fault, but there was literally no update. I don't even think they showed the Arby skin. They pretty much gave nothing. So when 16th came out, they showed the Guild War, they showed the Guilty Gear collab, they showed the new units, right? It was a lot of content, and that's why Global was happy. We had no clue all this balance kind of stuff. We weren't expecting anything else in that regard. So that hopefully that helps a little bit, and you can let other Korean players know. That's why Global was happy. It's not because I don't think we see things differently. Anyways, do you want to continue down the timeline? Is there anything else we kind of went off branch there a little bit?
Well, I think the only thing left to say about the timeline is that it's understandable that the Global might, not have it's not like there's like a real-time monitor of like happiness of the Korean server, like just readily visible on the Global side, right? So until something really visible like the review bombing started happening, it's kind of natural that no one really, it seems sudden.
Yeah,
it
exactly.
seems really sudden and out of nowhere. But in Korea, this was building up for months steadily, and it was in no way without warning. People were, streamers and influencers they were going like, look, this is getting worse and worse. I don't know where the game's headed. We were doing so well just right before AOL. Where did things go wrong? Because the reputation, I think this is a big point that I want to, this is a goal that I had going into this interview, is that to help people understand the cultural differences that kind of contribute to this divide we have. And I mentioned in the post, point one that I saw on global communities, Koreans are being whiny for no reason, or they think they're Koreans are always crying, they'll never be satisfied.
Sure.
And I think this notion, plus the Korean notion that global players are brainwashed and they're just complacent.
Yeah.
This might, I think this comes from a divide in expectations. And to kind of elaborate, I'm gonna have to preface this by saying games are a big deal here. It sounds really weird. You wouldn't really imagine, like, video games aren't really, everyone plays them, right? But no one like goes out and like talks about like, hey, what games do you play? When the first person you meet, right? Like on the street.
Yeah.
In Korea, you could do that. And I don't really want to urge people to go digging through my Reddit profile, but if you do, one of the other big posts I made was a very similar one to this, trying to explain to the global MapleStory community why Korean MapleStory was blowing up. That was last year. This is a very kind of similar incident where I saw basically the same mentalities. Global was super happy. Korea was not.
Okay.
And to give this kind of context, we have this kind of protest culture that started. Maybe I think to give it a starting point, it would be early 2021, where the Korean FGO server had a huge incident where basically, I think to summarize, the Korean FGO server didn't receive the same kind of rewards as the global and Japanese servers.
And FGO, just for the audience, is Fate Grand Order?
It's Fate Grand Order,
okay.
Right? And it had a sizable player base. It wasn't super popular, but it was sizable. And what they decided to do for the not the anniversary, the New Year's event was, hey, we don't give these Korean, the Korean publisher, I think Netmarble, pretty sure, okay. Said, we don't give the Korean server the other rewards that the other servers get. So let's just pad on the rewards to this New Year's event so that, it feels like it makes up for it. And people were happy. We were like, okay, fine. We're getting, this stuff's getting made up for. And then some kind of thing started on Twitter where a Korean Twitter account showed this off, and then Japanese Twitter thought, hey, why is Korean FGO getting more than us? And they started complaining. So what Netmarble did was they pulled the entire event. The rewards are discontinued. They were like, okay, well, sorry, Twitter's not happy about it, so we're gonna stop you guys, stop the event. That's when people, flipped their lids. It wasn't, they weren't a very competent kind of, dev team. And all the issues that had piled up for 3 years basically exploded in the form of the protest truck. And this, I know it's kind of like a meme, but if you think about it, a protest truck is just like a moving electronic billboard. You put anything on it, and it stands in front of the building of the dev company for the entire day, or several days if you have enough money. And what happens is that the media catches on real quick. They'll go and take pictures in front of this. Pictures of the truck will spread on the internet, and this is where I think some of the disconnect happens. You can't really imagine something like that happening in the States or anywhere else.
Yeah,
it's only that because games have been so kind of socially kind of accepted in Korea, and they take up a big part of social interaction, that sure. This is kind of like a viable protesting method.
Okay, yeah. So, Mr. Objection, real fast. I actually, before we went on during the Twitch stream, my chat was bringing up the truck situation. I had no clue what they were talking about, and I'll put guys, don't worry. Probably when he was talking about it, I'll have a picture up ready for y'all. But there is a news truck, and it was saying something along the lines of Smilegate treats their players as wallets, right? Money pockets, I think.
Yeah.
And that was 11 months ago. It went on, apparently, was it Korean news? Like national news?
Yeah, probably. Sure. I mean, I can't. There are a lot of trucks that go up. I can't.
So just that, Mr. Objection is saying like the Korean culture is so different, because he's exactly right. Here in the U.S., I can speak as someone from the States, no one even knows what mobile games are, let alone take it like super seriously. And so there is definitely a disconnect in the way the mentality is. Did you have more stuff to talk about, Mr. Objection, or can I give my take real fast on the whole, I guess, culture on protests and things like that?
I guess what I could add is to kind of illustrate the impact, right? So when I mentioned about MapleStory, is that it was one of the biggest games in Korea. It's like a household name, basically. It's an old ass game. A lot of people played it, and last year there was a RNG kind of manipulation issue, and like something dishonest that the Nexon did.
Okay.
So. But not going into too much detail, basically a bunch of protesting, a lot of kind of trucks were given. It got major news coverage. You could see it on morning news on the TV. It was that big. And even my parents, who had no idea what any of these games were, they called me. They're like, "Son, do you play that MapleStory thing that I'm seeing on the news? Are you getting scammed?" That was the image they were getting.
That is crazy. Okay.
The news was, essentially, a truck comes up. It says, there mentions like, RNG manipulation, percentage manipulation
for mobile gotcha games. Yeah. Or sorry, MapleStory wasn't. It's an MMO, correct? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But with Korean games, there's a lot of RNG stuff. I'm not going to deny that. It's a
Sure.
lot of the same kind of ballpark.
Yeah, I'm playing
So,
Lost Ark right now. It's not any different.
oh, I think I will mention Lost Ark later, but
Okay.
but basically, so, this image got painted of Nexon and MapleStory that this was like a casino game. Never have your kids playing it because it'll scam them out of their money. They're not honest with their percentages, stuff like that.
Okay.
So even the people who had no idea what MapleStory were, suddenly have this terrible image of it, and its reputation fucking
All good. Don't worry about it.
plummeted. And you could see that's the percentage. There's like a site that you can look on. It has the percentage of like kind of games being played at PC cafes or PC banks.
Hmm.
Of course, League is number one all the time, but MapleStory was pretty up there. It was like third place, and it plummeted to out of the top 10 even. And anyone who still kept playing were even insulted by people who only saw the news. They're like, why do you play that?
So it was a very,
Like,
very big, like, nationwide kind of impression
oh
after
yeah.
this result got out. Everyone
So
kind of knew
yeah,
about it.
yeah. So this, I hope, illustrates kind of impact that news about games can have. Why Koreans are so quick to
Passionate.
act on catch on to kind of greedy practice and stuff like that,
Okay.
because obviously these things work. Nexon has been kind of, at least MapleStory has been scared straight lately. You can actually see it was in their 2021 shareholder report. There's actually a thing saying we're going to focus on regaining user trust instead of chasing short-term profits due to recent events.
That was from
That's
MapleStory, you
like,
said?
that was, yeah, from Nexon's
After the
2021,
RNG manipulation. Got it.
yeah, Q4 like shareholders report. It's available for free online, but it was crazy, right? So
I believe you. Thank you for sharing that.
yeah,
Yeah, the culture difference is definitely huge. And speaking of
yeah.
RNG manipulation, there is something you mentioned. I don't know if you want to go to that now as a segue, but there is something you mentioned in terms of not necessarily RNG manipulation in Epic 7, but someone that Korea brought on that
Mhm.
was known for having in the past rigging rates in other games.
Oh, right. So I think talking about, so I'm not super eager to go into like Smilegate staff territory. People look into that a lot. But I know some global people think it's like conspiracy
Mm-hmm.
kind of territory. So all I can say is people are here pretty keen on stuff like that. If there are certain like sudden suspicious hires with weird experiences, you can see like they look up their past jobs and stuff like that. And for example, like there have been mentions of rigging rates and stuff like that. And I'm just gonna say that this might seem conspiratorial, but the reason people dig into these things is because it's just the fact of the industry that stuff like this happens. Um, the There's actually a law that's struggling to get passed right now, trying to kind of set these companies, game companies straight, especially in terms of probability.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that isn't it already in order. They have to reveal that happened also in the global. Even for
yeah,
things like loot boxes, they have to disclose the percentage rates of which, if it's a random gotcha box.
yeah. It took a long time for it to get through the process because it was fought so hard by the game industry,
Yeah,
and these major companies.
sure.
And it actually was a part of the reason a lot of trucks happened in the last couple years, because, well, actually last in 2021 really,
Hmm.
because a lot of companies, they saw this law coming. They were like, okay, if we can't stop it, we might as well come clean and reveal stuff now. And some companies, including Nexon, in that famous MapleStory incident, they
Yeah.
revealed their probabilities for a bunch of RNG stuff that previously was completely obscure. And people found out then some of it was actually rigged. Some of it had some weird algorithms to it. Whether or not it was intended or not, the fact of the matter is they didn't bother to fix it.
Sure. So let me can I give my side then as for the global?
Yeah.
So the reason I know I've said the word conspiratorial when I look at some of these takes. First off, let me start by saying I know for sure, even before you kind of gave some insight, I know for a fact that companies have been caught rigging rates. There's a few examples, but I don't want to state them just in case, you know, I'm not exactly up to date on my info. But I know people have been, or companies have been caught, you know, having rigging RNG. However, if we want to push Smilegate to be better, in my opinion, I think we need proof if we want to use this as an example. Otherwise, we're kind of just breeding mistrust among the player base on areas that we aren't sure on. We can blame Smilegate for a lot of stuff, like you said, the balance. We can ask them to do better on balance, but I don't think we should bring up like example CEOs suspicious background unless we can provide some proof that he worked for a company, you know, that was caught, or if he was directly involved in, like, let's say the Maple story, if he worked for Nexon, something like that. I just don't think it's in good faith to use that as an argument to push Smilegate to be better, right? Because until they prove us otherwise, we got to have some faith in them that what they're disclosing to us, that the rates are correct, right? So that's why I call it conspiratorial, not to detract from your argument, but I want to believe that until Smilegate, you know, is caught doing something wrong, that we have faith, that we can have faith in them. I think that's the best way to view the game, right? Until it actually comes out that they're doing something not true. So can you just let me know, from your understanding or from your knowledge, so far there is no proof that these hires, maybe they have a shady past, but there's no proof that they were in a company doing X, you know, rigging rates or anything like that?
Well, I can't say personally because I haven't, you know, I'm not, you know, in the habit of just looking into stuff like that personally. If stuff like that comes out, then, you know, then we'll know about it.
But as of right now, just to your knowledge from browsing the communities, you haven't seen like a news article post, right? Saying like,
I think it's a lot of speculation.
Okay, that's all I'm curious on.
Yeah,
all right.
I just ask that you don't take, you know, I wouldn't take all the speculation as another like argument, but rather just as a reflection of how, I guess, little the player base has come to trust the dev team.
Sure. The precedent is there. It can definitely happen. But so far, from just you browsing around, maybe it'll come up. But from right now, so far, no proof yet. Okay. All right. We can move on from that topic. That's what I wanted to talk about. That. Where do you want to go next, Mr. Objection?
Let's see. Well, I'm looking at my post for a bit.
Sure. No problem.
Yeah, I know it was a long one.
Yes, I actually really appreciated that you made this. And while you look that up, let me just make I'll probably make an announcement in my intro, but Mr. Objection does not speak for the Korean player base. I don't speak for the global player base, but he seems to be knowledgeable on a lot of what's going on. And of course, I've been part of the global partner program with Epic 7 pretty much since the revamp start. And so we can kind of share our insights onto the situation, but in no way do we speak for anyone, right, Mr. Objection? We're just here to kind of hopefully learn a little bit about each other's experiences, culture, and then maybe come together a little bit so that we can kind of not view each other so negatively. Each other being global and Korea player bases.
Right.
All right. Did you?
I guess I'd like to touch on one of the major reasons I actually made this post was I got tired of coming here and seeing, and on Reddit basically, in every thread talking about the drama.
Yeah.
People are going, oh, Koreans, which it's a clever word, putting, you know, Karen together, but it's not
I haven't
exactly
seen that. Yeah.
People actually on Korean communities actually do look on Reddit, and because they always want to gauge the global player base's reaction.
Yeah.
But there just hasn't been any communication because no one there really knows how to speak English or has a Reddit account or whatever. But what they got away from a lot of these posts, like just scanning these posts, they were like, look at these guys, they're calling us Koreans, they're making fun of us, they're, you know, stuff like that. And it's just some very there were some, I think, comments that crossed the line.
I'm sure.
Some kind of not in great taste. And I got tired of seeing these comments, and I think a lot of them tried to attack the character of the Korean player base by mentioning the quote-unquote mass YouTube reporting. And I mentioned this in the post.
Yes.
The only thing I could find after a lot of scouring about mass YouTube reporting is one Arca.live post with like 50 upvotes, less than. and that was it. It didn't get shared anywhere. I didn't see any major streamers talking about it. I didn't see it get, the YouTube thing get mentioned as like a way to protest anywhere. So it just baffled me that one screenshot of this came up, and a YouTuber is making a video about it saying Koreans are toxic, and there's the post with like 500 upvotes saying, "Look what they're doing now. They're trying to take down the YouTube channel," and all the comments are like, "This is despicable. Koreans are so, this
Mr.
is
J,
like,
do you remember? I didn't catch the video. Do you remember which content creator made that one that was talking about?
am I allowed to mention specific?
I'll cut it out if we have to, but I think we can.
Okay, it's I believe his name.
Okay. Yeah, I'll look.
Yeah.
I'll look it up later. All right.
Yeah. So people, and even I think this video got linked to me several times actually since I posted this thing, and even though in my post I said I linked to the Reddit post with the screenshot of that post, and said this is the only thing I've ever seen about it, and someone in, I think a top reply, linked me to that video which was talking about the very same post and said, look, it was a real thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's the exact same post.
So basically the evidence, there's no real evidence, maybe just a few outliers that were trying to target the YouTube, but overall from your findings, it's not really happening in mass from the Korean player base?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's a thing at all.
Okay.
I think the only reason I think people did it is because there's a combination of people being mad at the stream.
Yeah.
And how there are no visible dislike counters now. I think,
yeah, sure. That's a separate YouTube.
I think people took it out in a very unhealthy way, and I don't condone any of that behavior, but I just simply don't think it was in any appreciable scale.
Okay.
Beyond like a few people.
Good to know, because I heard about that too. Now, can I ask you a question, Mr. Objection? So, what, in your opinion, is the difference between trying to report the YouTube channel versus review bombing the actual app? Because you said you're not cool with the, mass reporting of YouTube. What makes the review bombing of the apps maybe more okay?
So, rather than being more okay, I'd say review bombing is a pretty standard practice, especially when it comes to mobile games, right? MMOs don't exactly have an app store page, but MMOs, a lot of people would do it by, they would post pictures of them discontinuing their spending, stuff like that. And in mobile, there are some myths going around saying, oh, people can't download if the rating's low enough. This isn't really actually true. People can still download Epic 7. It's 1.1, I think, right now.
We're dispelling a lot of myths, because I actually heard that too, and I believed it. So you're saying even when the reviews aren't low, players in Korea can still download Epic 7?
Yeah, people can still download it. It's not blocked right now. I think the idea came from someone saying if it gets too low, it might get blocked by Google automatically. But if the dev requests that it's opened up again, it will be. And I'm pretty sure no block of any time really happened. If it did, that's my fault for not knowing. But it's not like an irreversible like block of it until it's not like we're holding it hostage,
Sure.
Keeping reviews down.
Yeah. I didn't know that.
So yeah, it's just I think so people I think that the review bombing causes more harm than it actually does, and I think a lot of people I did want to address this kind of notion I saw on the global side. The Korean player base hates the game. And I cannot stress enough that this is the exact opposite of the truth. In every sort of major announcement regarding review bombing, or any kind of protesting, the end message is always, "Let's fight for a better future for Epic 7." That's like the takeaway. People who don't like the game have quit already. That's in Korea. This is a phrase like "고민 접어." It means if you don't like it, then leave, right?
Okay,
and
I like that.
And people do. They move on to other games. But people who are sticking around through this whole ordeal, trying to keeping up with the drama, keeping up with the devs, and being this way, they do it because they love the game. They want to keep playing it. And a lot of Korean players will stress that they're only doing this because they want the game to last, and the current balance situation is not the greatest indicator for longevity in a game. I
Okay.
think.
So then, do you mind,
Yeah,
Mr.
go ahead.
If I start asking some questions here then?
Yeah.
Okay, so then let me start. I want to ask about the exact. I know you may not know the exact. Like I just mentioned, you don't speak for the Korean player base, but I'm sure you have an idea better than most on what exactly it is the player base wants, right? But before I ask that, I think one of the comments that I've heard from a lot of global players is, will Korea ever be like completely satisfied with the whole balance situation? It's such a tough topic to handle. I guess that'll segue us into what exactly are the demand, or not demands, but yeah, what does Korea expect from Smilegate so that they are happy again and so they stop review bombing, the ratings?
Gotcha. All right. So obviously, I gotta stress, if some, there might even be some Korean that watches this and says, that's not true, that's not what I want. But I'm just speaking for what I've seen a majority say. The only thing that's just in common for sure is that people want nerfs.
Interesting.
Nerfs, for not just like this one-time nerf for the 7, disasters, right?
Yeah.
But introducing the concept of nerfs into the game again, so that balance can be maintained in real time, and not just waiting for this power creep unit or this irrelevant unit to get just buffed again, and then things just keep escalating. I don't think anyone thinks that this buff only policy is going to last. It's just not sustainable, I think. And I think basically people have, when you talk about nerfs in Epic 7, you have to talk about recalls and compensation.
Yes, that's where I was going to lead to next. Do you know if players, when we talk about nerfs, let's say Smilegate does allow nerfs in what the Korean player base wants, are Koreans expecting selectors compensation, or are they okay with just nerfs and not having anything?
So I would say the great majority that I've seen, or at least the great majority, and a lot of the and pretty much all of the content creators that I've seen, say that for this game to last, we need to just just forget the compensation. Just bring nerfs in for the sake of the game. Just please.
Wow.
Like in a lot of these content creators, especially these big voices, they're in higher RTA. They're sick of seeing the same 7 units in every single match, playing a game of who goes first and who takes more of them. They're like, they make alts so they can play on lower tiers, so that they don't have to see as many of these units. It's kind of, stuff like that. They just want the game to be fun again. And I'm not going to pretend like the entire Korean player base is saying, we're going to sacrifice the investment I put into this MO5 unit so that the game can last longer. There are always going to be people asking for stuff, like free stuff. There's always going to be people in any community.
Yeah.
And all I ask is that people don't take the opinions of these people who just want free stuff and say, see, that guy wants free stuff. All Koreans want free stuff. They'll never be satisfied.
Good to know.
Yeah, and it's this. We actually did get this free slate, I think, free bottle.
Yes, a lot of surprise for global. A lot of free stuff in our mailbox. It was Sky Stones, I believe, a bottle. Yeah, slate.
Yeah, and I saw a few comments saying Koreans are still mad. They're free slate. What could they want?
Yeah, but that's not really addressing the overall issue. It's more of a band-aid fix. Before we move on to that part, in terms of the free stuff we got in the mail, I'm very happy. I shouldn't say happy. I'm trying to be more objective, but I want you to know that a lot of the, I think, content creators and more competitive RTA players, I'm not going to speak for everyone, just like Mr. Objection, only speaking for the players that I know, they're also okay. I think a vast majority do want nerfs, and we're also okay with nerfs without compensation too. I think a lot of us were under the impression that if Korean players wanted nerfs, you guys may have wanted ML selectors, because in the past, I think you mentioned you only played in the past year. In the very beginning, there was selectors given out after a nerf. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm aware that people are taking the kind of, I guess, like kind of requests that the Korean player base had for the devs back in 2019 or something
Hmm.
as a kind of precedent as to what we demand this time.
Exactly.
I don't think that's I don't think that's a productive assumption. The game's in a different place, um, and the game has changed quite a bit. We know that change can be enacted, and I have to say the mentality of playing a game like this in Korea is to have it last as long as possible. You hop on a game, you're in on the ride basically,
Mhm.
and the kind of standards you have for a healthy game are one, it needs it needs to like have, well, in a game like this where PvP is like the main appeal of the game, no no shade to people who want to focus on PvE, but
Yep.
for a lot of players RTA is like the most enjoyable content. PvE mostly represents autoing, um you know and there's some fun stuff maybe with the new Asian inheritance mode, but still
Yeah,
PvP.
PvP is one of the major features of Endgame. So
Yeah.
let me ask Mr. Objection. Another impression that global players have, or assumption, with precedence, is that the reason the game has no nerfs at the moment is kind of a result of that previous outrage from the Korean community where they nerfed the Moonlight 5 units, got compensation, and now Smilegate doesn't want to do another nerf because they don't want to give out more ML5 selectors. I think that's the impression a lot of
Mm,
global players have at the moment. Do you have
right.
any? You have a take on that?
Right. So I think this is a super tricky issue.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to make any hard statements here or there because you can't deny that ML5s are worth a lot compared to a regular Covenant 5-star.
Sure.
Trying to pity a Mystic is takes it's not a small investment. And of course there are people just 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 pop them like candy from Covenant summons, but how many people are, I personally haven't gotten one.
Same, yeah.
So but the majority of people, ML5s represent a huge money investment. So it's you can kind of understand where where some people might get mad if an ML5 was nerfed without any compensation.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and some people say even if there's no like free ML5 selector, at least let us like recall the molars or whatever. I think that's a fair demand if they recall, like just like recalling
Yeah, I agree actually.
molars or whatever. Yeah, sure. I don't think that's an unfair assumption at all, but I don't think the ML5 selector is really on the table really right now. People know that's not a healthy direction for the game, and it would set like an unhealthy kind of precedent
Okay.
um, going forward. Even if people take evidence from like 2 years ago in 2019 or whatever, I don't think any of that should be used as an indicator of exactly what the Korean community is saying right now.
Got it.
Yeah.
I'll
So, and
say I'll
yeah,
say
go ahead.
it seems like regardless of what happened in the past, I think right now I can speak from like you're speaking for a few of the content creators, not everyone, but I think a lot of our goals then are aligned. Global also wants balance adjustments, and we're okay also with nerfs. Maybe some people aren't as cool with nerfs as others, like the more casuals that just want their Moonlight Fives to be special. But overall, I think the competitive players that focus on PvP, RT specifically, definitely want nerfs. And I think we can just say, regardless of what happened in the past, at least our two communities are aligned on that. So that's
Mhm.
good for me to hear.
Yeah. Um, and I think a lot of this kind of like hesitance, I think, comes from a fundamental issue in the design of how they made Mystic roles. I think Mystics people definitely have noticed that if you look at it just kind of from an objective standpoint, Mystics are worth way too much compared to a regular Covenant bookmark. They're super limited in how many you can get. The pity is way higher, even if it carries over or whatever. Um, and the rates on Covenant or whatever are super low. In a time where you don't even really want to be blowing any Covenant summons because who knows what kind of whack ass Covenant summon's going to come next. So I think people notice that that's why there's these clashes people in global are saying stuff like, well, if Korea really doesn't care about compensation, then why are they complaining about the ML4 pity, right? And I think a great majority, if you ask people, anyone in the Korean community, would you prefer not having the ML4 pity or having this ML4 pity? Everyone would say, yeah, I think the ML4 pity is great. The only reason there's discontent about it is that it's still 110 rolls, I think, 120, 110
Yeah,
to get a
110.
4-star. Yeah,
I think.
it's still if you think about it, it's still a few $100.
Yeah,
If
it's
you
not
weigh out,
great. It's an extra option, which, like you said, I don't think anyone should complain about, but it's
yeah,
not a great system. And it
yeah,
stems from the fact that it started with AOL, which could be seen as the root
right,
problem of this whole ordeal. Yeah, I
yeah,
don't think I don't think there's any disagreements for the most part. I don't think anyone really loves the ML pity. It is what it is. Or sorry, the
yeah,
ML4 pity system.
right. Yeah, I've just seen some people saying Koreans never get satisfied. They got the ML4 pity. Stop complaining about AOL.
Yeah.
They fixed the issue.
So just
And
like you
there.
said, there's some Korean players that maybe just out for the rewards. There's a lot of
Mhm.
global players also that are kind of just saying things that don't really represent the overall majority, I
Right.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think essentially, well, there was even this famous picture. I don't know if it showed up on Reddit or not. Back when the AOL banner happened,
Hmm.
there was a guy who rolled 8
Yeah.
trying to get one AOL. I think he spent thousands of US dollars, if you convert.
Sh-
So
I'm sure more,
that's
yeah.
yeah, and it was just you see stuff like that, it really just sobers you up. But I'm sure in the position of that guy, ML4 pity is great, but not everyone is that guy who can just
Yeah.
go
Yeah, yeah.
through like 8 ML5 pities or whatever to get one ML4. So stuff like that. I think that's why people Koreans like think of spending money on these games as an investment rather than just I'm having fun, so I'm spending money.
Hmm.
Um, it's an investment, and it comes from this kind of mentality, especially in a lot of MMOs in Korea. If you spend money in a game, you can actually get a lot of it back by selling your items or whatever and converting in-game money to real game money with transactions and stuff like that. It's very possible. It's a very real system,
Okay.
and it's a real industry. So there's a mentality of spending money on a game, and it's an investment for the long term. Um, and that's why people are so focused on longevity. They want the game to last. Otherwise, it just feels like the money's gone poof. And I think this is a mentality I haven't seen a lot of some of my friends in global share in a lot of mobile game communities.
Hmm.
They kind of treat it more like I wailed on this game because it's fun. I like the game,
Yeah, I
but they
think
don't
that is
really
definitely
treat it.
true. I think that's definitely
Yeah,
true. A lot of global players don't really view it as a long-term investment per se, unless you were to do some stuff that's not allowed, like sell your account.
hmm,
Yeah, I don't think anyone really is looking at it in that the same way that maybe Korean players do, for sure.
yeah, yeah. And you might say, what are you talking about? Epic 7 doesn't have like a currency conversion system. Yeah, but this is just the mentality that's been ingrained in the
Yeah,
game industry.
I've seen other games that do it. I think you could probably do it in Lost Ark, for example. Yeah, there's a lot of
Yeah,
games you can
yeah.
convert things back and forth, for sure, for sure. That just kind of ties back into the cultural differences overall.
Mhm.
Is there something else you wanted to talk about real fast? Otherwise, I have something I wanted to
Yeah.
bring up. I'm scrolling up here. I had some notes as well.
I don't know if there's anything more about demands or whatever. It's just that yeah, we want
Okay.
nerfs.
I,
Yeah.
I think you might have addressed it in the Reddit post here, but there was something you mentioned about Ravi, for example, and I think you kind of explained
Mhm.
it a little better. But this is one
Oh yeah, sure.
I definitely wanted to talk to you about, and I believe it was the overbuffing of Apocalypse Ravi and then putting
Hmm.
her on the Mystic banner right after, right? So
Ah,
before
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
before I elaborate on that, what so is the Korean players didn't like the fact that they gave Ravi some major buffs and then put her on the Mystic banner right after? Did that seem like a cash grab?
So I think this requires some nuance, right?
Of course.
This isn't a question. There's two variables in this equation essentially. One is give her a rerun or not. And I think there was another comment that actually, I don't know if this is what you're going to ask, but there was a comment saying do you want to gatekeep people from having a Ravi? If she's buffed, of course they want to have people get access to it, and I agree. That's not the variable that I think that's in question.
Okay.
Because people are saying, oh, Koreans are hypocritical because they're complaining that Mediator Karik hasn't gotten any banner, but a Ravi got a banner and they're complaining. What do they want?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some confusion there, right?
Yeah, please elaborate for us.
Yeah, the other variable in question here is these are tier, like, well, we call them tier 5 in Korea. I don't know what, tier 5, like bottom tier, right? Bottom tier units that were buffed to just smithereens. They were just.
You're saying Kowarik and Apocalypse Ravi were they were not meta, they were bad, and then they got. I think we use like C tier, and then we'll go to like S tier. But I get what you're saying.
Something like that. They went from bottom to top in like just one patch, right? And I think if they had a more, I think this is another question of balance, because if they had a more tempered buff, they toned it down a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
They made, if a Ravi was like a decently balanced unit, like a good bruiser, can heal, it's like whatever, but somewhere along the line she got a little too much, and so did Karik, and now they're mainstays in RTA. Can't keep up in top RTA without having these units. And especially when Karik came right after AOL, and everyone's looking for, I think,
an answer.
Yeah, everyone. It seems like every time I looked on kind of YouTube, everyone's talking about this unit could be an AOL counter, and that was like the biggest clickbait you could do. AOL counter. People are like, oh, what AOL counter?
Mm-hmm.
So I think Karik, was a really, he shuts AOL down. I think he like single-handedly made AOLs go from like 300 speed to like way slower
after his buffs, though, right?
Yeah, after
the buffs, yeah.
So I think the variable that people are complaining about is that they were buffed way too much, necessitating them in the higher RTA meta. If they were just kind of balanced units, and people could kind of gauge their value in Mystics, right? Do I really have to roll for this unit? No, I don't think so. I can live without him.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be a problem. So I think this confusion comes from, well, what do you want? Do you want them on a banner or not? I think it just says that the Korean community thinks that these buffs were way over the line. And it's another question of the devs' kind of balance judgment.
Right. So the root of the problem was that they just got overbuffed. I think the main thing, and you already corrected it, but the whole whale baiting for I think the Aravi is not the best example, because the alternative, like you said, is to release a overly buffed unit, or sorry, to overbuff a unit but not give him a rerun, which is, in my opinion, even worse.
Probably
than
worse.
even if Smilegate is kind of being greedy on giving the banner because they know overbuffing a unit going to get a lot of sales. The alternative is not having access, and you're punishing the player for not pulling on Kowarik, because everyone, right? I think the Koreans also viewed him as very weak before he got his buffs. Is that true?
Yeah.
Right, so a lot of players skipped, and then if you don't give a rerun, you're just punishing players for not having access, even if it is secondhand a cash grab, right? Whale baiting to an extent. I think it's a lesser evil, and in my opinion, they should have definitely ran Kowarik. Knowing how big the buffs were, they should have gave him a rerun banner too. But I think we can come together and say, yeah, they were overbuffed, but that's part of the problem. I don't know if you want to talk about this, if maybe Smilegate needs to hire a better balance team. I don't know how hard that is, but it's very tough to release either, right? To have either a buff patch or a unit release to be perfect. Like, do you guys know about I'm going to give some Boomer reference here, the Goldilocks and Three Bears? Have you heard about this?
Oh, yeah.
So the kid's story of, the girl has to find the situation that's exactly right. So sometimes it's too hot, sometimes it's too cold, sometimes the unit's too powerful, sometimes it's too weak. And when Smilegate releases something too strong, people complain. When Smilegate releases something too weak, people complain. So I think it's inevitable that they're going to try some things out, and they can't hit that perfect balance every time. So if they do happen to overbuff, they really got to run a banner with it, even if it's seen a little bit as whale baiting. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the whale baiting kind of thing comes from the intent behind the extent of the buffs.
I think the most clear example of whale baiting, which you put first, was AOL, and I think that is 100%. I was not happy with that move. the fact that there was no pity, the fact that they brought in a 4-star that strong was clearly right, trying to get some money, and that was a move I definitely disagree with. But the balance, the other stuff, I think can be a little bit more nuanced for the other units.
I think the sequence of Mystic banners would be another factor. Right after AOL, they put out the line.
Yeah.
And she is now one of the 7 disasters. And after that, we got, just this Mystics. We got some, Mystics in between that weren't nearly as destructive.
Sure.
I think, so which is good, but I think that should be the minimum, right? We shouldn't get game-breaking Mystics every 3 weeks. It's just not sustainable. And yet that's just kind of how it felt for the months leading up to this incident. But but besides that, for balance, I think people, I know balance is a tough issue, but there's one thing that people know is that everyone knew even before AOL came out, that thing is going to be a juggernaut. That thing is not healthy for the game.
Yeah.
You need to nerf that. They said right as the stream came up, and the stove post came up with the update, all the comments were like, "Don't let that thing into the game," but they did. A lot of calls for nerfs before she came. That way, even if you, this isn't even a question of compensation. You can't compensate anyone for nerfing a unit that's not even in the game yet. Right?
And they've done that in the past, for example, with like Cerise.
Right.
Yeah, with her restrict mechanic.
Yeah, so it's just why didn't they do it? This is kind of a reason why people think communication is lacking. I'll go into communication a little bit.
No, that's perfect. That's actually what my next question was going to be, but I'll let you wrap up this
right. Yeah.
This topic.
Yeah, so as for balance, we have this balance survey, but it obviously kind of doubles down on we're not going to nerf anyone, right? It doesn't ask, who do you want nerfed?
Well, let me start by saying in their announcement post, they specifically said nerfs are not on the table for now because it would cause too many issues, right?
They said, well, I don't know if it was translated the same way.
Okay.
But in the Korean message, it said, we don't want to create unnecessary stress for users by introducing nerfs.
Okay.
Saying, and stuff also like, oh, well, we were listening to you guys saying you wanted MO5s to be buffed, and we put that precedence on that over buffing certain Covenant units.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they phrased it was super weird. It's hard. It's a language thing. I can't properly explain here, but all I can say is the vibe that people got off it was saying, "You guys asked us to do this, and this is where we got. This is where we are."
Yeah, we saw that too on the global side.
Right.
But part of that, if you just want my take from the global perspective, not necessarily exactly that part with the nerfs, but I see some truth to the fact that they wanted to buff ML5s because players were asking for it. They wanted to they stopped caring about releasing powerful units because there was a point where a lot of units were stale. Right before AOL and all the collaboration, there was a good span of maybe 6 months where the unit releases were a little bit under, like, mediocre. Nothing was like how you guys would put, what do you call it, like tier 1? No tier 1 units especially. So they wanted to spice things up, and that's where this whole train wreck started. So from our perspective, it's not necessarily like this is what you asked for, deal with it. More like they're giving a reason why this happened, and I don't think AOL is a good excuse for that. But some of the other changes, like the Apocalypse Ravi buffs, even if they were too much, besides AOL is the only one in my opinion that is truly like we can really hammer them on. That one is there's no excuses for it. The rest I could definitely see a defense, like they were trying some stuff out. They wanted to make it exciting releases. Right.
Yeah, and I think this is it's just one thing to remember when you consider these arguments. People, I think, in counterpoints to my post, a lot of people brought up certain lesser concerns that the community had. Like, they would say, "You think Bad Cat Armin is the next AOL?" And I'd be like, "I've never heard that ever."
Yeah.
Where has that ever been? And I'm sure if I asked them specifically, they might link me to like one stove post or something from Korea. This events of this nature, there's going to be one event that kicks stuff off, which I think here is the AOL thing. That's where everything started, and everything snowballs, and people are going to pile their personal grievances on to the list, right?
Sure.
So things that might seem less significant will make it onto the list of grievances
Yeah.
because this is, and that doesn't mean that if you have one of those lesser grievances on the list, that the list is any less important. The big thing is still on there,
Right.
which would
And the
be
big thing to circle back is balance, and more specifically, nerfs aimed at the 7 great disasters
at nerfs aimed at the 7 great disasters and
and
continuing
nerfs
on.
in the game in perpetuity, right? Nerfs in general
Yeah.
allowed. Now,
Yes.
so if that's the overall take, I think I'll tell you right now, a lot of global is on board with that. Nerfs, a lot of people think that is the best solution. Now, we were just talking about how Smilegate said they don't want to add that, or for now they're not going to because it's going to cause stress to some players. Where does that leave the Korean player base then, Mr. Objection? What are you guys going to do if Smilegate doubles down and they refuse to nerf? What are you guys expecting? Are y'all going to continue the review bomb situation? I know you can't speak for everyone, but maybe you've kind of heard what people are talking about in terms of content creators, just what you see on the stove. What's going on?
So I would say that this is very little kind of people. Some people are kind of getting resigned, right? It's they kind of doubled down on it really hard.
Smilegate has? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, Smilegate has doubled down on no nerfs.
Yeah.
And there are people saying, well, damn, they said no nerfs. But there are people who are still fighting, saying that you want the game to last, you need nerfs in the game. Think about it, Smilegate. And, I think maybe some review bombing might die off over time, as is the nature of these things.
But you think the Korean player base will hold strong? Most of them that are going to stick around are going to try to maintain. That's the main objective. There's no maybe compromise?
I think there's very little compromise that can be made when have this like big underlying, we're only going to buff from now on thing on the table. I think that they really should rethink that. So I think people are going to continue to fight for nerfs. Of course, there might be a small portion of people who are just kind of resigned to this fact, and they might look for alternate solutions. But I'm, also of the opinion that just continuing to buff is not sustainable. So I can't say exactly for sure how long the review bombing will last, if Smilegate will hold on to this kind of position until it dies down. Who knows what the strategy is.
Sure.
But I can't say that people are not happy.
Okay.
People are livid.
So the main thing is just we need the nerfs, we need the balance, and until then, the Korean player base is going to be, holding true to their, how do you guys put it? The protest, is that what y'all call it?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. Protests. Okay. We say when a game is in the state, we say it's on fire, and I'd say we will still be burning for quite some time.
Actually, that's a good question. In terms of how serious other gacha games in your experience, like the Maple Story example you gave, how would you rate E7 in terms of the player base not being happy? Is it pretty serious right now?
I would say it's a little bit. I'd say overall it's very bad. E7 has a pretty bad reputation already
in Korea. Okay.
Overall, because of the 2019 incidents. There was the incident that I'm not of course I wasn't actively playing then, but I have certain friends who filled me in on some of the bigger incidents. Plus, I'm going to link to you if you don't mind.
Sure, please.
There's how do I explain this site? It's called Namu Wiki. It's a wiki, as you might have noticed. But it's basically the Korean Wikipedia for all things, right? I think everything's on here. It's crazy. But Epic 7 definitely. Okay. And I use this site a lot because for any given topic, like celebrities, games, corporations, or whatever, they always have a page that details every controversy that has happened. And Epic 7 has a separate controversy page. I can link it to you right now. You might need to.
Yeah, sure. I'll show the YouTube audience what you're talking about.
If you look at the table of contents in this page, it is insane. it is incredibly long. Epic 7 does not have a great reputation. It gets these, you might not even have heard of some of these incidents in global, but they've been happening like every couple weeks, every few months, whatever. It's just an insane amount, even for for a 3-year-old game. It's pretty insane.
So compared to other gacha games, this is a lot. And you said this is a website that a lot of Korean players use, and it's well known as just a database for what it catalogs like certain controversies. Is that what is that what this is?
Well, it catalogs everything, and controversies just happens to be one of them.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, this site's pretty amazing in my opinion. But
yeah, thank you for sharing this. I don't think a lot of global players know about this stuff.
Yeah, so this, even if you you read through the whole thing, just the number of incidents on the table of content should give you an idea of how many things have happened in the history of this game.
Yeah.
That have led to it being less of kind of having a bad reputation. Smilegate actually, as a whole, to be frank, they have a good reputation right now only because of Lost Ark. None of their other games have had good, have had happy fates.
Okay. Can I give the global perspective on this, Mr. Objection?
Yeah.
In my opinion, of course, like one more time, we just gotta make all these disclaimers, right? We don't speak for everybody, but I think a lot of global players, right? Epic 7 might be one of their first major gachas, maybe their first gacha period, and the way that like the new player experiences and the way that how free to play friendly it is in the beginning and how much free stuff in the beginning was a lot different, but nowadays players, I think the new player experience is one of the best in terms of just the most well-known gachas. I'm sure there's more obscure ones that maybe do it better, but in my opinion, I think a lot of players view the game really, really good in terms of not only just the community managers, how much rewards and compensation they give us, the holiday events, but until you get to the end game where it's the RTA and the balancing, I think overall global players are really happy with that experience in Epic 7 compared to some other examples. Yeah, I don't have to go into other gacha games, but yeah, like the free to play, what you can do is free to play and how easy it is. And in terms of having like a solid game that has good visuals, animations, PvP, not chibi, yeah, I think that's why maybe a lot of global players are very happy in general.
Yeah, I can't deny the even starting fresh as a new player, I thought it was great. It didn't take that long to get used to the game. They spoon feed you Wyvern 13.
Yeah, they do now. It's you can do it in like 2 days now.
Yeah, so it's that I will not deny, and people in Korea know this. They know They know that there are people who are just happily playing the game without a care in the world. They don't do RTA. They're in a tier of arena that gives them the number of sky stones that they're happy with per week, and they're having a great time. It's just that when you get to the more you progress in the game, right, you want to put your units to use, and all roads kind of lead to RTA eventually.
Yeah.
If you don't decide to stop progressing. All the gear you farmed, all these units you've pulled, all the builds you have, you want to show it off somewhere, and the achievement, you come to RTA, that's where you want to, that's where you end up. And I think
right now the Koreans feel like that end game is not suiting their needs. Smilegate is not doing the right job in terms of what they're asking for or what they need for the end game.
And one of the biggest standards for a game doing well is how many newbies come in on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Right. If there are no newbies, then people will keep, maybe people keep quitting and the game will die off. Right. And there are people in the Korean community that are like, only whales care about this, right? They think, only whales who are in high RTA are actually affected by this. But the truth is that, eventually, if you keep playing the game, you're going to go into PvP, unless, you really just don't want to touch it. And I know they're just straight PvE players, and all the respect to them. But this is like the main appeal of the game for most people, RTA.
Sure.
There aren't a lot of other games like this that have such a dynamic PvP system, the kind of like mental just kind of wrestling you do during the draft is really fun for a lot of people. I know for some people it's stressful, but for me also it's like one of the best parts of the game.
Mhm.
But if you think about it from a newbie standpoint, it is tough to get into RTA.
Yeah.
You go like maybe up to maybe you don't have any trouble getting the RB skin or whatever going to Masters, but sooner or later, like you could be in gold, and all of a sudden, you pick like your favorite unit, like I don't know, you pick. Like you pick your Violet or something, and then the opponent straight picks like Celius A. Ravi, first two drafts, and you're like, oh no, and I know a lot of people who are newer players who've been scared off of RTA due to stuff like this. They're like, I don't think I'm ready for it, and it's a shame because it's like, I think it's the best content the game has to offer.
Yeah,
And I think,
I think we can all agree to that there is an issue. I've discussed in the past that there needs to be maybe some kind of I think the Koreans are viewing it as the nerfs will kind of help that new player experience. I want to take it even a step further and say there's definitely an issue with RTA, and new players, after they enjoy the PvE aspects, branching into RTA is very, very tough, and I think a lot of players have issues and maybe even quit at that level.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, we would want like some slight catch-up mechanics where it's not trivializing the endgame player's investment, but helping new players get to that level faster, whether that be through the balance like the Koreans want or through other means. But I think that's a separate case. What I wanted to ask was, so overall, this page on E7, you're saying compared to other gacha games, there's less controversy or less like incidents for the most part?
I think, well, I'd say E7 is one of the most controversial games out there. And I specifically for, well, if I want to just narrow it down into Korean gacha games,
Yeah.
they're all gonna have some amount because Korean mobile game companies are not known for, let's just say they're not known for being super transparent.
Okay. Yeah.
So obviously there's gonna be a lot of communication differences, and I think I do want to segue into communication here a little bit.
Yes, let's go ahead there.
A lot of this.
Let me just say I think this is a good example of showing another time the cultural difference or expectations that a Korean player will have versus a global player and what they kind of expect. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to communication. I'll let you start because I also have I wanted to share some light or shed some light on that as well.
Sure. Okay, so I think I'm going to try my best to explain this. But there is a difference, I think, that I've observed in the last few days of what communication means for Korean players versus global players.
Okay.
Because global players, when I mentioned there hasn't been any real communication in my post, people brought up counterpoints saying, "Are you kidding? You guys got this and this and this. You don't call that communication?"
Mm-hmm.
And I'd say, "Yeah, no, that's not communication." And I don't want to. Maybe you could show this on video. I'm gonna type in 2 words in Korean, and one is this. This is 소통. That means communication. Another word would be 홍보. This also can mean communication, but these are 2 buzzwords that float around a lot in Korean game circles. I'm going to explain the difference. So 소통, or what we would call communication, is a 2-sided affair, right? It's both sides taking each other's points and bouncing them off each other. It's very, it's dynamic. It's people feel like they're involved, and a good example of this, actually, ironically enough, the best example of 소통 that I can give in E7's recent history is that emergency broadcast. That emergency broadcast with very little just prep, very little scripting.
Yeah.
It was organic, even though because it was hasty and just very hurried. You could tell it was they had less of a kind of barrier between.
It was more honest, maybe.
I hesitate because they didn't. that was obviously the same broadcast that led to the big
Yeah,
disappointment for those
it
teams.
wasn't good overall in
Yeah,
the Korean player base's eyes.
right. But this is that was a good example because they outlined that they know the issues that players have had. They're like, okay, we hear you.
Yep.
Right? We're gonna try to do something about it. That and um the difference between that and what I'm gonna go on to next, Tongbo. Tongbo is like a notice, like as in like an eviction notice. It's one-sided. Um you're being told something, right? And you have very little say in it.
Okay.
And that is what people would categorize most of um Smilegate's
Posts,
kind of post
streams.
streams as. Yeah. A lot of these scripted streams, a lot of these pre-recorded videos, lots of these stove posts that act, they act like they are two-sided communication. They act like, well, we listened to you, we get your concerns, but when you go through their arguments in depth, you can tell that they're just kind of pretending to listen and then saying, okay, we get you, but we're going to do this, okay? um so I think it's a very fine line, but Korean players have danced on this line for a very long time in the gaming industry as a whole. Um, and that's why I think some people might take in global what we call a one-sided 통보, and they would say that's communication. See, they're listening to the players. They say they're listening to the players. What's your problem? It's just the difference of standards. They're, you know, as I've said, the gaming industry is very important here.
Mm-hmm.
People put a lot of investment, both monetarily and just personally, into these games. They put love into the game called 애정. Um, the people say to me like, "Oh, this is my 애정, 진짜 애정하는 game. This is the game I really love." They put their heart and soul into it. That's so when they feel that the team behind this game that they put so much love into is just kind of saying, "Okay, here's a notice, deal with it,"
Yeah, almost
then
being
it doesn't.
disrespectful.
Right. So I think this is a cultural difference. There obviously there are some people that I can't get through to on this. They might say, "Oh, that's nonsense. There's no difference.
Yeah.
You're just being nitpicky or whatever." But this is a very big topic, and people know when to distinguish these two things when they look at a broadcast. And I want to kind of let me pull up an image. It's a very famous image now in Korea. Give me a second.
Sure.
This is the first thing that people saw after the opening kind of cinematic for the Vivian Carrick event in this last stream.
Yeah.
I think some people were confused about this. Is this? Bam.
Ah,
This is
yes.
Mr.
So
Navi.
I was discussing the crossed leg kind of thing.
Yeah, I know this is another culture thing. It's a body language thing. It
Sure.
might seem like I'm pulling this out of nowhere.
Yeah.
This is an incredibly disrespectful stance. And in kind of, so if you think about it, right, Smilegate is not on the. They should be on the back foot here. They should be being very careful about how they come off to their player base at this point. When they've done an emergency broadcast, they've shown kind of that their vulnerable side with this kind of hastily put together stream. And what happens immediately after the opening cinematic is this. And I know this might not have been intentional. I think personally, this was supposed to copy the stance that Vivian has in her new artifact art.
Mm-hmm.
Same. She's sitting on the throne, like with her legs crossed exactly like this.
Yeah.
But this is a stance. Like if I was in front of an elder and I made this stance, I would get smacked on the head.
It's very disrespectful.
It's extremely disrespectful. And when you're you're broadcasting in an official capacity like this in the current situation that we're in, Smilegate should be, it was viewed that Smilegate should be acting as respectful and careful as possible.
Yeah.
And this is the first image that we see coming out of the cinematic.
I could definitely see that being in poor taste.
Yeah. So obviously people were already ticked off through the whole stream, starting with this image. So this is where I think this little image a lot of people cite saying this is the kind of attitude that Smilegate has with us.
Okay.
This is like a perfect kind of summary of how they feel about us, right? It's kind of symbolic at this point. So this is when you have a one-sided notice, a tumble, it has the kind of this power dynamic where the recipient feels like they're being looked down upon. And I think that's the core of this issue, is that game communities in Korea demand, even if it's just on the surface, even if it's just an attitude issue, we demand respect, right, from the devs. Even if we know all the money that we're spending on the game is going into their pockets or whatever, as long as they keep on this respectful tone, and they're open about trying not to whale bait and stuff like that, then
Yeah.
people will spend money because they love the game. They know that it can last, right? So when you get stuff like this, it's obvious, maybe this will help some people understand why people were so angry on the stream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. I actually talked about this also. I heard about this in your post. I asked my chat about it, and definitely, I'm not Korean, but I know in Asian culture, for sure, there you can have things that are other people will not understand. This can be seen, I believe it, as super disrespectful. But just to play, like, do you know if when Koreans make these, when the Korean Smilegate streams decide to do like skits like this, in your opinion, do you think they're also keeping the rest of the, are they also planning to show this to global? And because I think they know a lot of other players, not just the Korean player base, watches this. Would you assume that, or would you say that's safe to assume?
So again, I haven't watched global streams. Maybe you can enlighten me a little
Sure.
bit.
Basically, we follow along, and Mashu and Gegedy used to be Mashu and New. They kind of have to wait. We let you guys go first, and then they'll get the go ahead, and then they'll show us. We saw this whole skit. Did this skit lead into Mr. Navi having like the safari thing on, and then he started doing the ancient inheritance, or was this something else?
I think this particular kind of script that he was going off of was about the new Vivian event. It's supposed to be about royalty and stuff, right?
All right. I'm not sure if we saw this one exactly. I'll have to double check on the stream.
Right. So it's weird, right? Because I can't say for sure the role that community managers have on the dev decisions. I do remember seeing on the anniversary stream, I think, at the very end, they had a bunch of Smilegate staff saying like, here's to like a great anniversary or whatever. And I do remember seeing global community managers appear at the very end on the Korean stream. And people are like, who are these people? So I'm not sure if we can interpret that. And this is again all speculation. So we can't say for sure. It's just but given that the whole stream is in Korean, and they know the people that are waiting for this stream the most is the Korean player base. I would say that it was probably very reckless of them to do this.
I can agree to that. I can definitely say like this was in poor taste. In terms of PR, that was probably not the right move, and I know why they're upset. All I was saying is maybe they weren't specifically, it wasn't maybe intentional. I think you already mentioned that it may have not been intentional just to spite the Korean player base, but maybe they were just trying to copy the Vivian or show like a cool skit to the rest of the servers as well.
Yeah, I think if we assume that's the truth, there's still some fault in them for not recognizing that this is in poor taste.
Sure.
But they've proven to have somewhat lackluster PR awareness.
Yeah, they can't read the room, like they didn't understand the situation.
Yeah, it takes a while for them to be like, oh no, something's wrong.
Okay.
So yeah.
Is that the main thing about the communication though? Sometimes they do a poor job, and then in this scenario exactly, it was very poor taste. Is that the main?
And this is where I'm going to bring up Lost Ark. So I know you've played Lost Ark, right? But and I know Global just recently got a release. I'm not going to be talking about Global. I'm talking purely about Korean Lost Ark.
Sure.
Because this might come as a surprise to some people. I too play Korean Lost Ark, but this basically, the Korean Lost Ark player base is one of the happiest I've ever seen in any video game community ever. Besides like the Animal Crossing community, I don't know, some kind of, is very non-toxic. Of course, there's some toxic because it's so big, but everyone's so happy with the devs there. It's insane.
Yeah.
And I want to explain why. Is because number one factor would be they know how to communicate with their player base. And you can't, some people, they can't help but compare because it's still Smilegate. E7 and Lost Ark are both Smilegate, and it's just like, it's just complete opposites in how they handle communication. But I'm going to basically show you, there are these, okay, here, they have English subs on this. This is Loa On, or Lost Ark Online, Lost Ark Online, or whatever. Yeah, it's a broadcast they did in 2021, and this is basically an event that Lost Ark held where the director comes up to the stage and it's fully live. They have, it's not pre-recorded.
Yeah.
Maybe scripted to some extent, but not in any kind of way that seems not genuine, right?
Yeah.
And this is the prime example of what people expect in the gaming industry for communication.
And in all fairness, Mr. Objection, let me make it clear, right? Lost Ark and Epic 7 are under the same parent company, correct?
Yeah, but different dev teams.
Different dev teams, but they're both under Smilegate. So you can kind of expect, right, that if one game does this, the other game maybe the player base will hold some similar expectations. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I think Lost Ark was actually a huge factor in changing the expectations that the Korean game community has for the gaming industry.
Okay.
Actually, a big factor of how MapleStory lost a huge number of its player base is because this trend caught on where people were saying, let's move to Lost Ark from MapleStory. And there were a bunch of comparison videos about all these things that MapleStory made you pay for, but was free in Lost Ark.
Sure. They set the standard for how to treat your customers or make a good game that customers will like. Okay.
Yeah. And you can tell the director of this game, he plays the game. He knows the concerns of the player base.
Is this Gold River? Is that his?
Yeah. Is that how it pops up? His name is Kim Gang-sun.
No. I just know about him because he had an awesome stream to celebrate the global release.
Oh,
and
great.
so
yeah,
a lot of the global players like him now. Yeah, they call him Gold River.
He is basically he's like the shining example of what people want the gaming industry to catch up to.
Okay.
Essentially.
And this is kind of ties us back into why the Koreans are being so strict on Smilegate or Epic 7, because they've shown like other games can have a higher standard, and it is possible to have this kind of communication.
Right. And the atmosphere in these streams is so positive. Everyone's like, "Oh my God, thank you, Cold River." People are, always just like appreciating what they do. And other game companies have been shown. For example, Nexon, which is known as I don't know if Global knows about this. But
they don't have the best reputation in Global.
Yeah, either. But there are these companies we call the 3 Ns, which would be NCSoft. They made stuff like Lineage, which is one of the biggest whale MMOs in Korea. Nexon, of course, and Netmarble, which is like kind of the mobile.
Yeah, I know a lot of those.
So those 3 are called the 3 Ns. They were kind of touted as the 3 like greediest game like distributors, publishers in the industry. And Nexon took a huge hit, obviously. MapleStory makes up most of their Korean revenue.
Yeah.
So when it took a hit, they took a huge hit in Korea. And they took some very obvious hints from Lost Ark. They started emulating the kind of practices that the Lost Ark director did in his streams.
Yeah.
They would try to kind of did some experimental things, like they discovered you can do very similar things, but they'll be received very differently based on how much your player base trusts you. For example, Kim Gang-sun, he Lost Ark director, he second anniversary, he put out like a surprise, like extra like gift for the anniversary, and the anniversary ended, and a bunch of MapleStory players came in. It was a huge event, enough that he noticed, and he put out the anniversary rewards again, so the people who missed out could catch up. And and people might hear this and say, oh, what you're saying is Koreans just want rewards and free stuff, right? Well, no, it's just a gesture of that the director knows that, oh, we have all these newbies, like, and they're willing to take care of these newbies and like make sure that they settle into the game. And again, like I said, the taking care of newbies like this is really, really important for the longevity of the game. So they tried their best to kind of like, have other members of the community teach people and stuff like that. It was very positive. And MapleStory tried to do something similar. They tried to undersell a reward they were going to put out.
Yeah. And
then be like, surprise! And then they discovered you can't do that when your reputation's in the gutter.
Right.
Because people just get angry in the first place. But now it's been almost a year now. They're only now beginning to recover trust
in their player base.
Yeah, they gave up a lot of game-based like revenue. They made a lot of quality of life adjustments.
Yeah.
And quality of life is super important, is because when they make quality of life adjustments, these are really small changes, right?
Mm-hmm.
These are things that you don't really notice unless you really play the game regularly. And you can tell when a game kind of just leaves quality of life things alone, that dev team may not even play the game. They might not even have the awareness that that's like an issue. Like maybe this button is like hard to press and like extra steps. They cut it out. Then oh wow, they really know what's going on, or at least they listen. But
so essentially, Lost Ark set the gold standard, and the Korean player base from Epic 7 would like the company to be more like the Lost Ark, how they operate.
And no one is expecting them to be at Lost Ark's level.
But just to be more like that in terms of respect, listening to the player base. Okay, sure. I wanted to ask though, this is a little bit separate, also tying into communication though, but in your post, I think that a lot of maybe you and the Korean players think that over here at Global, we are kind of the favorites and we have like a lot of communication and what we say and do is kind of what happens. Is that kind of true?
So I think there is that sentiment going around, and I don't think it's much of a kind of, I think it comes from this kind of barrier that we have between the player bases. There aren't a lot of opportunities like this to hash out what really goes on, obviously. So I think there's that. But I think if the Korean player base thinks that Global's listened to, and the Global player base thinks that Koreans are listened to, then obviously
there's something wrong.
There's something wrong, right? And I think the issue would come from, at the root, they don't really listen to any particular player base at all.
Okay.
At least not in the way that at least we would expect them to. So since the Korean player base feels unheard, they go on Reddit, and they find a lot of times, because of the differing standards that people have, Global is super content and about a lot of stuff that Koreans may be less than content with. I don't mean to say that this means global players are complacent or whatever. It's just a difference in standard. That people, it's not commonplace for people to have like a gold standard for the video game industry.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I can think of a single kind of parallel to how we view Lost Ark's team in the global community. Like if there's any sort of like,
I think
gold standard dev.
Not for a global dev, but I know like Final Fantasy 14 has really set the standard for MMOs. but that's a
Right,
Japanese company,
right.
obviously. But it really kind of WoW took a huge hit, and your example with Maple Story, and they can't recover either. Final Fantasy has shown how to run a they weren't good in the beginning, but they revamped the entire system. They're super open with communication. I don't play it, but that's all the stuff I've been hearing. I think maybe that's a
Mhm.
decent example.
Yeah, I have heard good stuff about Final Fantasy. I don't think it has as big of a player base in Korea, but from
Sure.
the
Yeah, just as
friends
an
I know
example.
hmm
But did you have any
yeah.
questions as first off, before I ask that, I want if you can maybe start spreading the info that global, even though the Reddit might seem complacent and some players are complacent and our cultural standards aren't they don't really make us as passionate to push for change as much as you guys. Let
Right.
them know that we have a lot of competitive players as well that do endgame PvP. And from what I've heard from you, our our end goal interests are almost the same. We
Right.
also, a lot of us want nerfs without compensation, if that makes the game better. We want balance to be better, of course. And yeah, we would like Smilegate to listen more as well. I don't
Yeah.
think there's too much difference in that regard. And I would try not to say, like, don't take Reddit as the main voice of global, for sure.
Mhm.
Just like you were
It's
saying, you know,
just
don't
it's
view.
a part.
Yeah.
Right.
Um,
Yeah.
but is there anything you wanted to maybe clarify in terms of how we communicate with Smilegate?
Well, I think I've seen some, I've gotten a decent explanation since posting about what the community managers are like, that they're not exactly like a direct hotline to the dev team.
Yeah.
But I think the semblance of at least a direct communication line is important. Because, I think they're in the Discord server, right?
Hmm.
They're active members of the community, which I
Yes,
think
they
is the
do a
important
very good
part.
job being just running streams that aren't even like balance or news related. They'll just do fun events. They answer questions. They hang out in
Yeah.
my streams. Yeah, they're very, very, very good at what they do in terms of just showing that they
Right.
care about their jobs. They care about the player base. But in terms of actual, can we reach out to them and have them forward the news to Korea and see actual changes, especially important ones like balance? It's very rare, if has never happened.
Hmm.
There have been
Right.
things like where I've given feedback and maybe like it'll be quality of life changes that we'll see within months or so. That sometimes happens, but big changes like this where you guys are pushing for no pity back in the day when you're pushing for now,
Right.
right, getting us mail like rewards in our mail. Global has never been able to do that. And maybe that's because we're not review bombing per se, but I do think it's more that you guys still have a huge, maybe like we said, there's some in between. You guys think Smilegate doesn't listen to you. We think they only listen to you, but there is proof that you guys still have a very big impact on how they listen. And over here at Global, we might be more the profits, more bigger player base, but we still defer to you guys, and I think you guys still have the major say. Just my opinion. Not to discount the fact that maybe Global does have, you know, some stuff that Korea doesn't, but in terms of actual
Sure.
gameplay balance and what we can actually see happening, I think it's still mostly you guys.
Right. I would say the only thing to qualify that would be to say that I think the sentiment kind of stems from when Smilegate does nothing, right? When they don't make any changes, and
Mhm.
it feels like we're unheard, then people,
Think they're listening to Global because Global's content.
yeah, so they think, oh, they're listening to Reddit or whatever and thinking Reddit's happy, let's not change things.
Yeah.
That's what I think the sentiment comes from. Not that, but and I understand that from what you guys have said, that Global hasn't actually had the real power to enact specific changes or whatever, and that we have the say about that. I just think that Korea was looking for a way to explain why they would ignore certain demands or just tend not to hear it, stuff like that.
Okay.
And I think that comes from, again, this kind of wall between the devs and the players.
Yeah, I could see
Yeah.
that. All right. Well, that was good to
Yeah.
know. The whole how did the 15%, I think you made a post saying like Koreans have a meme now about being called like the 15%. Did Smilegate actually come out on a stream and say, "Hey, you guys are only 15% of the profit"? I mean, not exactly, but did they say something like, "You guys are 15% of the profit. We don't really listen to you as much anymore"?
Let me give you the exact.
Yes, please.
Whoa, there was an event called Epic Festa, um, and it was a in-person event, where they have these, for games they have these in-person events. It's kind of like where you go to like it's kind of like big crowds of people. They sit in
Uh,
front of a big screen, like
yeah, a
PAX or
convention.
whatever. Convention. Yeah. And people would cosplay and stuff. Yeah, basically stuff like that, right? And this event was largely seen as a failure, because they made a lot of in-game decisions that like they announced there that people weren't happy with. Let's see. The question was, are you planning? So the preceding question was, are you planning anything for the first anniversary? And they said, yeah, we're planning this, this, etc., etc. And they said, are you planning anything for the global server? 열린 것도 이제 대만 유저들의 열망이 뜨겁기 때문이다. Okay, so this basically means, just like Guilty Gear, with Guilty Gear, every time we updated in February, April, May, the Korean profits were 15% about, and America, and this America, 미국 is strictly USA,
Yep.
takes 40%, and we're going to discuss with our marketing team about the global anniversary in November, but the users need to basically express that they have the passion for that to happen. And this was really weird, right? It's like you need people to speak up and say, yes, we want something to celebrate the anniversary, to actually do something. And
were they talking about they need the global players to speak up, or the Korean players to speak up?
It just says, they didn't specify whose, but they said in another version they had another roundtable conversation, and they said the only reason that opened up is because people were so passionate about it. So two kind of weird things here. One is that it's like, okay, they're gauging user kind of passion about stuff.
I think it's poor taste to answer a question saying like, you guys are profiting or making us this much while America over here is making us way more. I don't think that's very good.
The question didn't mention profits at all. The question was, are you planning any global events?
And they brought up that, like, that's what I wanted. I wanted to know the context. And if you could do you have a link to that, either the transcript? Yeah, just send it to me so I have it. But that definitely.
This is the actual article, and this is the Q&A.
Thank you.
So basically, imagine you're at a event designed for the Korean player base, celebrating, right, your first anniversary, and so they ask, oh, well, we have a global server now. What are you planning to do for that? And they say, well, I mean, global does make us a lot more money, so we're definitely planning to do something, right?
Yeah.
And then they add on some weird add-on thing about, oh, well, we're going to gauge like player wants, like how much they want that. It's like, well, okay. It's a very weird response.
It's trying to like maybe breed competition, or so say like, you guys need to spend more, show us that you want it as bad. The
reason this stuck around so much as a meme, there was a particularly passionate person at the roundtable conversation, which happened very shortly after this in 2019.
Yep.
They said something that a lot of players kind of could appreciate. And the way the devs were answering some of these questions, obviously, when you have a statement like this in mind, it kind of seemed like they were kind of thinking this in the back of their minds. And one of the players at the roundtable said, we can already see you have that 15% thing in the back of your mind, so stop it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And, the devs got very, I think they took quite a beating there. And this is why, when people first, when I looked up 15%, because people were, always mad about 15% resistance, right? In global.
Yeah, sure.
That's not a thing. We call it tradijohang. It's not 15% resistance. You don't call it that, because 15% will refer to this incident.
You guys refer to this incident. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So that's what I meant by
this
that.
This kind of conflict between the devs and the players in Korea has been going on for a while.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I want to reiterate, there are some people on my post saying, well, yeah, that's just facts, right? It's just business facts. Why are you mad? But I will reiterate that this is a question of attitude. There was no reason they need to bring that up on that question, nor any reason for them to express it to the Korean player base at an event like that. It just just boggles the mind. And we're currently not. We're apparently some people have taken screenshots saying that Korea's share of profits is now up to 25.
Yeah.
Which I don't think makes a huge difference. But basically, I think this, hopefully, this helps some Koreans understand that, I think we have more of a chance to be heard, and if we don't get heard, it's not a question of global just outstripping us in profits or something.
Okay.
That's a misunderstanding I hope to clear up on both sides.
Yeah, sure.
And I think the one default here would be Smilegate for having bad taste
Yeah.
at this event.
All right. Well, is there anything else you wanted to wrap up with? I think I got all my questions answered.
I guess that's it for me. I guess I'd say this is like the 50th time we're saying this. We don't represent the
Korean global,
and
yep.
communities.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate that. I have seen there were some Koreans who PM'd me on Reddit. They just made new accounts. They had gotten the courage to kind of speak up after seeing the post, and they added onto my post. I really appreciate that, and I think I tried to fill the role as best as possible, but I think the more bridges between the communities, the better.
Yeah.
I'm definitely not there. There might be a Korean out there who listens to what I say and say that I don't agree with everything he says. Some Koreans think this. That's great. We get more sides of the argument. All power to you. There's even, I think, a newer post that I saw yesterday from a Korean discussing possible solutions for the current situation. I think healthy discussion like that is fantastic.
All right. I guess the thing I'll leave us with is please let the Korean player base knows that that a lot of if we can get, like you said, that they post more, we can talk more between global and Korea. I already know that a lot of the differences in viewpoints can be remedied by just explaining, right? The culture's a little bit different, and honestly, how it sounds is the end game goal on both parties, both global and Korea, it's very similar. We both want the same things, just the methods are a little bit different, the culture's a little bit different overall. But yeah. Very, very good talk, man, and I appreciate you coming on.
Yeah. Let me know when the video comes up.
I will. All right.
Appreciate
your time, man. Take it easy.
All right. Take it easy.